Today, we are going to be talking about this book. So this is Stormfront, a novel in the Dresden Files by Jim Butcher. This is the first book I've gotten from the library in literal years because I have this collection of books and then I've slowly realized that a lot of books I don't feel like I need to have like a trophy on the shelf for. I want them reserved for the special books. And while this book is good, I don't know that I would ever particularly like reread it. It was fun to read once and I'll probably end up reading the rest of the series, but I don't know that I need it to like hoard up space on my shelves that are pretty limited as is. That said, the summary of this book is that our main character, Harry Dresden, is a professional wizard, and he promotes himself as such, and he does little oddball jobs to pay his rent and just exist in the world. Now, he does work in the real world, the non-magical world, and he, does little things. He'll find people, help find missing items, just kind of usual little stuff. And as a wizard, it pays the bills and he's fine with it. That said, he usually also gets called by the cops to help look up stuff of like some kind of peculiar things that they're like, maybe this is more your thing. The whole magic stuff. Can you look into it? Now, of course, they don't know the whole world that goes into being a wizard, and of course there's a separate world for it, and they have their own rules and stuff, and he doesn't really mix those too much, so naturally, worlds collide and a client comes in and suddenly everything lines up and he has to deal with the bad guy. And that's about all you can really say without a whole bunch of spoilers. So the gist feeling of this book, it's somewhere between like a sarcastic main character, because Harry's pretty sarcastic. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but he's really sarcastic. But it feels like Charmed with the way that like kind of the magic system works in a lot of ways, mixed with Nancy Drew. Now, if you've never read Nancy Drew, that's fine. They were published in like the 30s, so like they're not exactly popular. For the comparison with Nancy Drew, the thing is she's a detective, which is kind of what he ends up being in some ways because he's trying to investigate a lot of stuff. But Nancy Drew, the plot isn't really that complicated. You kind of know what to expect going in. You know that eventually she's gonna defeat the bad guy, and that, the little things might be a little like, oh, I didn't see that coming, but for the most part, you're like, oh, the thing that happened back there, oh my god, it ties to the nail. Like, the plot isn't trying to be shock-filled, and this book definitely has that too, where you kind of know roughly where things are gonna go. Like, his assistant skull guy has him make 2 potions. Oh my god, what could go wrong? And then guess what? Things go wrong. Like, stuff like that, that you just know it's gonna come up. And like different little things, and it's not a bad thing. It's not bad to have predictable things come up. It's just, it happens a lot in Nancy Drew, and she's a detective, and a lot of it's like the adult version of Nancy Drew, because Nancy Drew is definitely more of like middle grade for the most part. Like, it's not like super high stakes of anything, whereas this definitely is an adult book. There's adult content in here, which is something I actually appreciated. It didn't go into a lot of the detail of it, and it's not like a smut book. Those aren't my thing. If they are for you, cool. It's just not for me. That said, whenever you pick up an adult book, you kind of have to wonder about it and be like, oh god, is that going to be the thing that comes up, or are we just going to be able to read a book and not have to have that be a thing? And so thankfully it wasn't. There is a couple scenes that kind of start to lead there, but it never actually goes anywhere, which is nice. Overall, I would say this is a 4 out of 5. It's really a good book. I just reserve my 5 out of 5 stars for the books that like I cannot put down. This one I was able to put down, and it mostly was just because of the verbiage that the author uses and like the style he wrote it. It's just not my favorite. Like, I don't really care for the like detective tone, and like that's the only way I can think to describe it, because like there's even an episode of Bob's Burgers where Tina as the hall monitor is investigating stuff, and it's the same tone, and I'm pretty sure it's like a classic from somewhere. It's just never been a topic I care to really look into much. Like, the reason I read this book is because my husband wanted me to. And honestly, it's not a bad book, and like I said, I'll probably end up reading the other books in the series, or at least a couple of them, see how they go. And the glory of a library is that you don't have to be committed. If you hate it, you can just return it, and then you're done with it. And that's the end of the story. So anyways, it is a really good book if you are into like detective mystery kind of books, and you also like magic, but not high fantasy where you're in a completely other realm. He's based in Chicago and like goes into a little bit of like I think it was like he borders into Michigan a couple times. So like definitely real world. It's set in at least the 90s, maybe the 80s. There's a few things that you're like, that would not happen nowadays. Because, you know, like having film canisters and payphones. Like, it's just little things. All that said, this is the end of the non-spoiler section, so if you don't want to be spoiled for some things that stood out to me, this is the end. I'll see y'all later. On to the spoilers. The things I really loved about this book, I didn't see like I saw that Victor Sells was going to be a bad guy. I thought he might be like a victim and like have to start tying it into the family kind of a thing. I didn't really see him being the big baddie, but I mean, looking back, you can totally see it. I don't think that's a problem though. I do like when you can just see the plot and it's fine. I loved the little skull creature guy. I know he isn't actually a skull and that's just where his house is, but I loved him. He was a hoot. He's sarcastic as well, and just the snark in this book is phenomenal. I also liked the little fairy that he'd comes across. That was fun. I think the like warden guy who's following him around probably was there more for like plot convenience, because honestly he wasn't there for a whole lot. And if he's watching every single magical thing he does, like why isn't he basically just there all the time? And I don't know, I'm glad he was there at the end, but it just kind of felt like, why didn't Harry just talk? Because if he would just explain things to people, like at least give like a little bit more, he would not be in the particular situations he would get into. And that was one of the things that bothers me in a lot of books where the characters are just like, oh my god, just say the words and you'll be fine. Stop being stupid. Just say the words. And so, I don't know. It was just like those two things were just kind of like, I mean, I get it. Plot-wise, it makes sense for him to cause more problems by not talking, but I feel like he could have just easily just slipped just a little bit more detail and would have been fine. And then the dude with the sword. I don't know what his deal was. I don't know why he hates him so much. Just feels like he shouldn't be the one in charge of watching every single move he has, because inevitably, like, their own bias will kick in. But overall, it was a pretty good read. It did take me a little while to get through this book. It was not like a page turner for me personally. I think if you like this style of the detective work, it would go a lot faster. For me, it was just kind of like, it's not the worst thing, but I found myself wanting to pick up the Lunar Chronicles way more, and so it was kind of a drag. I think I might read at least one more book in the series, but for now, I mean, I could end it here and be perfectly content with it. I just want to see if it gets any better or worse. I would love to hear your thoughts on this one in the comments down below. Make sure to like and subscribe. I post every other day, and until next time, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all soon.